I took care of my uncle in his last days while his own kids abandoned him, believing their mother's BS story to frame him to be with her lover. After his passing, the truth came to light because his wife is now showing up everywhere with her boyfriend, who's as young as her kids. Now they want me to help them repent, but I'm just waiting till they find out about this plan of his because he left his secret $2 million estate to me. Oh boy, they can't stop ringing my phone. So I don't really know where to begin with this, but I'm gonna try and put my thoughts together the best I can. Please bear with me. I, 34 female, lost my uncle, 55, male, a couple of weeks ago. He had been dealing with pancreatic cancer for the past few months, and since he had been diagnosed a little too late, the doctors tried their best, but unfortunately, it didn't work out. Him and I had always been very close. He's my mom's younger brother, and we have always been told that we are pretty much the same people. So when I was younger, he was my favorite, but then he got married and moved away with his family and we drifted apart. When he was in his mid-20s, he had been dating this woman, let's call her Meredith, and nobody from our family really liked her because she just came off as very pretentious and it felt like she was always looking down on everyone. But my uncle seemed to be head over heels in love with her, so after 2 years of dating, he proposed and they got married and then moved away to another state. After that, my uncle sort of minimized contact with most of our family and everyone felt kind of hurt, but there was not much that people could do. He had 2 kids with her, Kevin and Sarah. They were married for almost 16 years, but that marriage unfortunately ended in divorce because Meredith ended up cheating on my uncle and he caught her with her boss. He still wanted to make it work with her, but she was the one who filed for divorce and ended their marriage. After that, my uncle decided that he couldn't stay in that state anymore, away from everything that he knew, and decided to move back here. Unfortunately, because of his decision to move back here, he couldn't exactly keep in touch with his children. His kids were in their teens, but they were still minors. So after a lot of drama, they decided to stay with their mom. And according to the custody arrangement, he had visiting rights, but his kids didn't want to see him. Meredith had turned him into a villain for them, making it sound like he was the one who was extremely toxic to deal with. And the only reason she had stayed married to him was out of love for her kids. But she couldn't do it anymore because my uncle was just awful. For some reason, his kids bought it even though I really can't imagine somebody as quiet and introverted as my uncle doing anything to make them hate their own father. But anyway, Meredith manipulated their kids into completely cutting him out of his life and even until his last breath, he had kept trying to reach out to them somehow, but they never responded. Even though I had tried to reach out to them through social media recently, after the diagnosis, they had ignored that as well. For the past 10 years, my uncle has been staying here a couple of blocks away from me and my family. And because I used to get along really well with him when I was younger, we decided to reconnect with him after he moved back. Obviously, he was going through a lot, and he needed us. Slowly, he started opening up about his life, and we got to find out that Meredith was the one who had manipulated him into cutting his family out of his life, and she is the reason he has started losing touch with us. Apparently, she believed that we were the ones who had always put her down and never liked her even though she herself never seemed like us either. And we treated her the same way and she had also made him give up on his dreams of becoming a writer, even though she had known about it all along and forced him to work in sales because she thought that he didn't have a future in writing and it was an unstable career choice. He was not happy as a salesman, which meant that he wasn't exactly good at his job and struggled to bring home enough money because as a salesman, he was mostly relying on commission. He also had a family to think about so he couldn't quit either and that led to a lot of bitterness in their marriage. But even then, he always tried to make it work with Meredith while she always threatened to leave him. Eventually, that's exactly what happened, and it ended up breaking my uncle even more because he had tried really hard and had given up almost everything that brought him joy for the sake of his family. And in the end, none of it had even mattered because Meredith had cheated on him and his kids had abandoned him. I felt terrible for him, and so I made it a point to try and be there for him to the best of my abilities. In the past 10 years, I have gotten married, and I've even had my first child, and we were all really close to my uncle. So after he was diagnosed, I knew that because it was pancreatic cancer, he probably wouldn't have a lot of time. I decided to spend as much time as I could with him because he really didn't have anyone else. And while he did have a nurse to take care of him, I knew that he wanted somebody to be there for him emotionally as well. So I would visit him every evening after work without fail, spend about an hour and a half with him and on the weekends, my parents and my family would also be there for him. We made sure that he was happy before he passed away. And I think we managed to accomplish that. I did it just because he was really special to me. He was a very good friend more than an uncle and I never really expected anything out of it. And now I'm very grateful that he decided to leave behind his entire inheritance to me. I found out about it a couple of days ago after his lawyer contacted me, and I had no idea that he had accumulated so much wealth over the past 10 years. From what his lawyer told me, apparently, He had been working as a ghostwriter after he moved back here and was not a day trader like he had told us. Besides, he had a pretty modest lifestyle, so we never would have guessed that he had so much money. Anyway, I was very happy that he had left everything to me, not because it was a ton of inheritance and I could secure my child's future with that sort of money, but just because he had been so thoughtful. But of course, now his family has started circling us like vultures because they want a piece of the inheritance as well. 2 days ago, I heard from my parents that Meredith, her boyfriend who's old enough to be her son, frankly speaking, and her children had shown up at their place to demand to speak to them or put them in touch with my uncle's lawyer so they could speak to him about the will because so far, they hadn't been contacted about the inheritance, and they found that very suspicious. My parents obviously did not entertain them and threatened to call the cops on them if they did not leave, and later on, they informed me about the visit and I was just shocked that they even had the audacity to come to us and expect that my uncle would have included them in his will. Naturally, since they had visited my parents, I had been waiting for them to visit me as well. Somehow, they managed to find out where I lived and yesterday, they showed up at my place too. But with me, Meredith and her kids were singing a very different tune and they told me that they were only here because they wanted to repent. Apparently, Meredith had acknowledged the fact that she hadn't treated my uncle with the kind of respect that he deserved. And she had no right to turn his own children against him. And even Kevin and Sarah, they were acting very sorry about the whole situation. They even managed to squeeze out some tears while speaking to me, saying that they really regretted the fact that they had allowed their father to pass away without even giving him a chance. Basically, they were trying to sell the story that apparently in the last few weeks, after my uncle had passed away, Meredith had been feeling really guilty about everything that she had put him through, so she had finally confessed the truth about their divorce to her children. And initially, they had been very disappointed with their mother but had eventually decided to forgive her and had come by to pay their last respects to their father right now. I could have just shut them out, but I was really curious as to how this charade would play out. So I decided to ask them about their visit to my parents the other day and why they had been rude to my parents but were being so nice to me. I thought that I really had them with that but they hadn't even thought this through. And Meredith explained to me that the only reason she had been curt with my parents was because my mother had never been nice to her when she and my uncle had been dating initially. So she didn't feel that it was necessary for her to be nice to my mom, but I knew the truth. I knew that it was she who had never liked my family. After they had explained that bit to me, I asked them why it had taken them so long to reach out to my family even though he had been gone for almost a month. I was quite blunt with them and I told them that if they were here only for the inheritance, they were just wasting their time. They immediately started acting all innocent, saying that the inheritance was the last thing on their mind, even though I knew for a fact that it was the only thing on their mind because they literally said that to my parents when they showed up there. I don't know what they were trying to do, but they were failing at it miserably, and I got tired of their saintly act pretty quickly. They were pretty predictable, and before they could even ask me for the contact info for my uncle's lawyer, I decided to tell them that I could provide them with the information, but it would be pointless because whatever the will contained, it had nothing to do with them. And that's why the lawyer hadn't bothered to contact them at all. That's when they started getting defensive and dropped the act of being all sweet and innocent. They told me that this was something that did not concern me because I was not a part of their family and they knew for a fact that even if it was very little, my uncle definitely would have left something for his children since it's not like he had been out of a job. He had been working as a day trader. And if nothing else, he at least would have left the house he had bought for his children because he had spoken a great deal about it in the emails that he kept sending them over the past 10 years. When they brought all that up, I realized that they actually had been reading all those emails but had just never bothered to respond to any of them. And I don't know why. It just made me snap, and I told them that they were wrong. My uncle had left absolutely nothing to them since that's just what they deserve. I told them that for the past 10 years, Kevin and Sarah had been nothing but horrible to their father. And they are in their 20s right now, so it's not like they are too young to understand the repercussions of their actions. The fact that they have shown up only now to claim their inheritance, it just goes to show how god-awful they are. And I told them that it's not surprising that they turned out to be this way given their mother is the exact same way too. She turned them against their father by making him out to be the villain just so she could have custody of them and wring out as much child support from my uncle as she possibly could, since he had managed to get out of paying alimony, thanks to his competent lawyers and her infidelity, and since isolating him from his friends and family, forcing him to work a dead-end job that he had no interest in and even cheating on him with her boss was not evil enough. She had decided to come back even after he was gone so she could get more money out of him. I told them that the worst part of all of this was that even in spite of knowing what kind of a person Meredith was, Kevin and Sarah did not seem to care about it at all. They were still standing by her side pretending that they were actually here to repent. But in reality, they just wanted the inheritance, and I told them that they should be ashamed of themselves. But even then, Being ashamed at this point is not enough because my uncle is gone and he passed away knowing that his family couldn't care less about him because they never showed up even when he was dying. This is why he had decided to leave everything to me so they could kiss their inheritance goodbye because they were not getting a single penny out of me. They could contest this in court if they wanted to, but they were going to lose because anybody with half a brain could tell that they did not deserve my uncle at all. And after putting them in their place, I slammed the door shut. They stood outside my door demanding that I open up, but I told them that I was going to call the cops, and unlike my parents, I definitely meant it. So eventually they left and I felt pretty satisfied with myself because for everything that they had put my uncle through, I felt like this was the least I could have done for him. He never got the closure that he needed, but I felt a lot better after screaming at them. I don't regret it, but my actions have annoyed my mother a little bit. And it's mostly because after that incident they started blowing up my phone with messages and emails. And not just me. They did the same with my parents, my grandparents, and a couple of other relatives. Basically, they're troubling everyone in the family right now. And even though we keep blocking them, they just keep creating new accounts and keep bothering us. I don't know how they're doing it so quickly since it's just been 24 hours, but they have sent me at least 1,000 texts and emails in the span of these few hours. And I'm sure that it's the same for my parents and grandparents as well. That was still something we could tolerate. But then about an hour ago, they made an account on Facebook specifically for this purpose and started posting about how awful I had been to them. They also went into great detail about how horrible my mother had been to Meredith back when my uncle had been dating her, and that's why she had made him cut his family out of his life because all of us were like this. They were painting themselves out to be the victims and claiming that me and my family had brainwashed my uncle against them and made him leave everything to me instead of his children. Never mind the fact that his kids hadn't even visited him when he was on his deathbed and that Meredith herself had cheated on him and then turned their kids against him. Obviously, nobody is buying this, but they have been tagging us, members of our extended family, and even my in-laws. They have tagged a couple of our friends in the post, so everyone has found it. It's not a massive inconvenience, but the problem is that it's still quite annoying since we have to explain the situation to everyone and tell everyone to block these folks. It's caused a bit of an issue, and my mom just grilled me for half an hour before I started writing this post because she thinks that if I had just shut them out and not entertained them in the first place, none of this would have been happening. She thinks there was no need for me to yell at them or say anything to them at all. I should have just called the cops on them and asked them to leave like she had done. But I don't really agree with that, and we ended up fighting over this. I think it was necessary for me to get my feelings out because I really hate them. I hate what they did to my uncle because, like I said, he was very special to me and he never got the opportunity to make his feelings known to these people. This is the least that I can do on his behalf. More importantly, I feel much more relieved on a personal level that at least I got to put them in their place. I don't even think the consequences are that bad. We can just threaten them with a lawsuit and have them shut up. I do think that my mom is being a bit unreasonable though. I don't think that it was that bad of me to scream at them and bloat in their faces about my inheritance. Anyway, I would like a second set of opinions on this, and since my husband agrees with me, I thought that Reddit would be a good place to ask for advice. AITA for screaming at my uncle's estranged family for the way that they treated him and telling them that he left everything to me and nothing to them? Update 1. So I did think about it and I guess my mom was right. I shouldn't have engaged with them, but I don't think I'm entirely wrong either. Nobody had devoted as much time as I had to taking care of my uncle and being there for him. And even though he tried not to talk about it as much as he could, sometimes he would express how disappointed he had been that his kids had chosen not to see him even after getting to know that he was ill. I had to try to give him hope, but he knew his children better than anyone. He knew that they would not come. And I hate the fact that he turned out to be right. And I don't think that I can explain that kind of frustration to anybody else because no matter what, I knew that even though I was there for him, he would always still miss his own children. As a parent myself, I can't even imagine going through what he went through. And just because he had had the audacity to refuse to pay alimony to a cheater, he never got to say anything to them, and they thought that they were getting off scot-free, that they could just show up whenever they wanted and start demanding their inheritance as if they were entitled to it. And I think it was very important for somebody to let them know that they couldn't do this. They couldn't treat somebody so cruelly their entire lives and then expect them to leave behind anything at all for them. I really loved my uncle. He was just like me. And like I had said, he was not only a father figure but also a friend to me. And it hadn't even been enough time since he had passed, so I did let my emotions get the better of me at that moment, and I ended up screaming at his family. If I could even call them that, maybe I could have dealt with the situation better. And if I had done that, maybe they wouldn't be creating so much drama out of nothing. So I guess I would agree that my mom is not entirely wrong, but I would also not say that I am entirely wrong in what I did. I've just lost a loved one, and I guess anybody who is a little emotional would have probably done the same thing if they had been in my position. I spoke to my mom about this as well this morning after 3 days of bickering with each other over this, and she seemed to understand where I was coming from. So we were able to come to an understanding, and I'm glad that we were able to talk it out. After all, it was true that I had spent the most time with my uncle and I had a special relationship with him. She even said that if anybody had ever treated me the way my uncle had been treated by his family, she would have probably lost her mind at them too. So, well, I'm glad to know that I have a family who will always have my back. I wish that my uncle's family could have been that way as well, but they are just a bunch of disappointments. Speaking of them, I also managed to find out certain interesting things about them, which finally explains how they were able to find my home address even though I had never even given it out to them. Neither had my parents or anyone else, but they didn't need that sort of help because apparently Meredith's boyfriend is an ethical hacker. Actually, let me rephrase that. He was supposed to be an ethical hacker, but whatever he's done right now, it's most certainly unethical. It also explains how they have been able to come up with ways to keep disturbing us online. I found out about all of this while stalking them on social media since Meredith had a public account and she had put up a bunch of pictures with this guy. It's really gross how she's dating a guy who's barely a couple of years older than her son, and it's pretty dumb how she has a public account even though her boyfriend happens to be an ethical hacker. She, of all people, should know the importance of cybersecurity. Anyway, while stalking them, I found his account, and, unfortunately, he had the sense to set his account to private, but I looked up his name and details on Google, and I found him on LinkedIn. That's how I was able to find the company he's currently employed in. And from what I've gathered so far, he tests the cybersecurity systems for an IT firm. After speaking to my mom and my husband, we have decided that I'm going to report him so that his employers can find out what he's up to and take the necessary action because it's very obvious that he's using his skills for something completely unethical. Whether it's in his personal life or not, I don't think it will reflect well on them to have somebody like him on their team because he's very obviously not trustworthy, and I'm pretty sure that they will take action against him. So I'm really looking forward to writing an email to them about this, and let's see how they feel when they face the music. Update 2. I sent that email to Meredith's boyfriend's employers 2 days back, and today, they showed up at my house and started throwing a tantrum about how I had caused so much drama in their lives. It has been almost a week since my last update, and after I sent that email, nothing really happened immediately. But then all of a sudden, all the texts and emails that I had been receiving from Meredith and her children from various addresses disappeared. I don't know how that happened, but it doesn't matter because I do have screenshots. And even the account that they had made to defend us and make us sound like we were the villains here, that account, along with the post, was also nowhere to be found. So that was good progress. And then this morning, Meredith and her kids showed up at our front door. They started yelling at us about how I had gone out of my way to create unnecessary trouble for them. First by bragging about my inheritance that I had stolen from them. I don't know how I can steal something that never even belonged to them in the first place. But, anyway, that was ridiculous in itself, but then they started blaming me for sending that email. Apparently, Meredith's boyfriend's company had reached out to him after that email, and he had been reprimanded by HR. They did take my claim seriously because even though it's not like I had any legitimate evidence, it was bad enough that he was associated with people like Meredith. And the fact that I had stated in my email that Meredith did not have my contact info or address because nobody had provided that to her, that obviously meant something. I don't think he got fired over this. I really wish that would have happened, but that reprimand was bad enough so he flew back home and dumped Meredith and now she's blaming me for it, which is ridiculous because I don't think this was my fault. It was her fault for making her boyfriend do her dirty work. Anyway, this time, I did not waste my time speaking to them. As soon as they showed up and started yelling at me, I called the cops from inside the house. And within half an hour, they were being escorted off my property. They were screaming like crazy, which did not do them any favors, to be honest, and Kevin made the mistake of threatening me. I don't know what happened to him. I think he had lost his mind or something, but for whatever reason, he thought that it would be a good move to threaten me right in front of the cops. Now we have decided that we are going to file a restraining order against all 3 of them because we are not going to put up with this kind of behavior anymore. So let's see how that unfolds. Update 3. Hi. So it's been 1 month since my last update, and so far, nothing notable has happened except for the fact that we were successfully able to get a 2-year restraining order against Meredith and her family. So hurrah to us. Also, a couple of days after that last update, I received an email from Meredith's boyfriend, I'm assuming. He apologized for everything, but didn't actually mention anything, and I think it was pretty clever of him. There was no direct admission of guilt. He could be talking about anything, but I'm happy that he came to his senses, I guess, and decided to apologize to me. I did not reply to him, but I'm not pursuing the matter further either. Anyway, it was not him that I was against. It was always Meredith and her children, and I think I've done enough damage to them. They are not going to be receiving even 50 cents from the massive inheritance that my uncle has left for me, and I think that's the most befitting punishment for them. After I got the cops to escort them off my property,